This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. This is the stuff that many of us ponder, but we usually don't want to talk about it, but we need to, and that is protecting your assets when you pass on, your estate. How does it all get divided up? Today, we're going to look at unique assets, interesting situations, and making a decision where they should go or how legally they should go. And it's all in her wheelhouse as she practices out of Maryland. She is an amazing estate attorney with so much insight so far. I've learned so much. Better start planning myself. Julie Schejbal joins us once again on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Steve. How about yourself?
Very well, very well. I love our conversations because it's almost as if the listener viewer is like the judge and jury. Like we're trying to figure out how this goes, how this should go, the legalese that comes along with it. And certainly it's easy to say you have a 401k and that's going to go somewhere kind of cut and dry on the simple level. But the unique assets, these other things that are part of many of our lives, we don't know where they go, how they get divided up. So where do you want to begin? Give us an example of an asset that is somewhat unusual.
Well, I think this is unique, but it's unique to a lot of families. So start with like a vacation home.
Sure.
And why that's complicated in a plan is not, it's a house, but if you have 2 or 3 kids or a larger, more than one child, I guess, not everybody maybe enjoys the vacation home equally. Or maybe they do, but they're not all going to benefit equally. If you have a house on the Atlantic Ocean or Atlantic seaboard, you have 2 or 3 kids that live in Maryland, where I live, they can easily take advantage of that beach house.
Yep.
But maybe you have 1 child or 2 children that live further away, Midwest, West Coast. They're not going to they're not going to get as much benefit out of this house that's on the East Coast. So it's sort of when you're dividing your assets, how are you going to look at being fair to all the kids, recognizing that they may all not benefit equally from that or like it.
What do you do in that situation I really don't even know where to go with that.
Well, I think like one way to do it is to just say, all right, we're just going to give everything equally among kids, and to like hope. And I know hope is not a strategy, but that 2 of the kids that want the beach house or are more likely to want it will accept it as part of their inheritance, and then the other kids can walk away with cash. So that's sort of the flexibility baked into after death planning. But one of the things you want to avoid, I think, is to just say, we're going to distribute the beach house in kind. So in kind means, and this could be actually any piece of real estate, is basically we do a deed after mom and dad die, and it's in Steve and Julie and, Sam's name. And then we all own the house. And Sam lives on the West Coast. He's a little irritated that he doesn't get any benefit out of this beach house. The problem with that is, if Steve and Julie won't buy him out, Sam can basically sue for what's called partition and force a sale of the beach house. So, your long-term hope that this family heirloom kind of thing can blow up because, and I understand why Sam would be not motivated to have a beach house if he lives in California. So it gets tricky. I think that, one of the things you can look at with property is putting it in a limited liability company. And what that does is you're kind of creating, this is going to get kind of weedy and people will probably fall asleep. But you're creating 2 tiers of ownership when you do this, sort of voting or management shares and non-management. Because so if Sam owns non-management shares, he can't force a sale of the property. So
interesting.
The property will stay in.
I've seen situations where in a relationship, Two people owned a house. Relationship ended. One of them wanted to buy the other one out of the house, went before a judge, and this particular judge said, if one party opposes the sale, then you're both selling it. And that's it. Done. And that's how it went down. There was no,
Oh
the
yeah,
judge said, yeah, that's it. You're selling it.
exactly. And the other problem with that is that, often now Maryland's changed the law a little bit, but it used to be they would sell it on the courthouse steps. So your crown jewel vacation home worth, $1.5 million or whatever it's worth, sold on the courthouse steps. Those people from, all those renovation shows on TV are lining up to buy it at auction,
Wow.
and they're, so it's not an ideal situation to sell it on the courthouse steps.
Mm. What about, and this is real. I have a friend who has a, call it a vacation home. It's up in the mountains, in a state, and her father owns it. And she and her family, so they go up there and they enjoy it. She brings the kids up there and everything. But here's the thing: her dad owns it. Fantastic, right? Except he co-owns it
Right,
with
absolutely.
two other people, and they're not family members. So how do you leave that to your family when you only own, I guess, maybe a third of it?
Well, I mean, you can do it. Like he could leave a third to his family, and then what you end up with, instead of this nice tight ownership situation of three people, you own it now with the if this dad dies, so his share is now owned by his kids. So let's say he has three kids, that third's owned by three people, and then the other two. So now you have, instead of three owners, you've got five, and now you're bringing in, and for the two surviving owners, it becomes tricky because maybe the kids, maybe you don't, maybe you've got, whatever those feelings are. Now you're putting new intangibles in the mix, and
Would
that
you?
continues, right? So you have,
Yeah.
and
I'm sorry. You go. I think we have a little bit of a delay today. You go.
well,
Go ahead.
I think we do. I was just going to say that problem gets bigger because if the other two die and they have more children, now you've got 3, 6, 9. When I was a kid, there was this commercial for henna hair. And the idea was, it started out with, and this woman said, I used henna hair and I told two friends and they told two friends. And the TV screen kept getting bigger and bigger till it was full of like 60 friends. Well, it's sort of that idea of, I have two kids who get it, and I have three kids, and I have four kids, and now all of a sudden three goes to nine
I actually
with
remember
all
that.
of
I
those.
remember that commercial, Julie. I really do. It was a great analogy. One more on that, the house situation. Would you be proactive before you pass, and I guess confront the other two owners and say, "Hey, I'm setting up my estate, my will. Um, this is what I'm thinking of, and I'm going to pass it on to my children." What if you didn't do that? What if you're uncomfortable doing that? Would you just put that in your estate planning, and then one day when you're not here, the other two people would realize that? The other two owners of the house would realize that?
Oh yeah, they would all of a sudden wake up and they'd be, oh, now I'm now the owners of Bob Share are Julie, Stevens, Sam.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where you have that collective asset. It's not just incumbent upon your friend's dad, but the other dads or moms to think about, what is the trajectory of this asset. Is it something that we want to keep in the family? And maybe one of them says now, well, I use it a little bit, but honestly, my kids live on the West Coast. Maybe they decide, they trigger some sort of buyout or something. Like, some of it can happen, naturally, because people are moving away or whatever, but you still, it's that kind of that situation kind of begs for those three people to get together and sort of think of the path of this asset.
How about some of the other unique assets that we should consider? Different scenarios.
So the other two are, they're going to sound dissimilar, but they bring a lot of the same stress, and that is, sort of a family business, whether it's, a smaller mom and pop or
Mm.
a relatively large one, or the family farm. And where, in both instances, part of the stress comes from, or issues come from the fact that, you know, farm was started, business was started by mom and dad or grandpa and grandma or whoever. And, they've been working it. And maybe, particularly it started with the grandparents' generation, maybe all the kids were on board, they grew up in the business, they grew up on the farm. Then you start getting to the grandchildren or the, generation down. And now you got people who maybe aren't interested in farming, or they're not interested in the business. And by the way, where I practice, there's a lot of farms, so I definitely see the farm issue
Mm.
a lot. But you still have that same stress of, well, now, I'm not interested in being in the widget business or the farming business. I'm a doctor or an engineer or an accountant or a lawyer, or I'm in the service, or name a career field that is not related that people may pursue. Um, and what you have then is, in a lot of these estates, the business, the farm is the crown jewel asset. Particularly, it's
Mm.
hard with farming because if the land may be worth a whole lot, but there's not a lot of other assets to balance the land out.
Oof, that one's dicey, I would imagine, because you've got two components there. You have the business, you have the land. So it's two separate things going on, right?
Right. And like with the farm, I mean, I have a case now that, I mean, I've been working on for like 3 or 4 years now. My clients are delightful. The rest of the family, a little dicey, but I think my guy told me the land has been an issue for 30 years. And I said, wow,
Mm.
that was probably almost I nearly longer than I've been practicing law. Um, but it part of the issue sort of is like when people are doing their plan, well, I want the farm to go to Steve. He's the guy that farms, which is fair. And then,
Hmm.
you ask, well, how do you want everything divided? Well, I want everything divided equally. And I'm looking and I'm like, well, okay, the farm's worth $1 million. You do not have $1 million in stocks and bonds and 401k money to balance this out. How are you going to treat your kids equally? And the other issue you always have, at least being a cynic, you leave the farm to Steve because he's the farmer. And farming is hard. Running a business is hard.
Sure.
There's no doubt about it.
Mm.
But, there's nothing once you get that farm or that business to stop you from saying, oh, I got this asset. I really snowed mom and dad. I'm selling it and I'm moving to Florida to sit by the beach and drink rum punch or whatever, because there's no control. So you're trying to balance that. So again, one of the things that tends to work with a farm again is this LLC idea, because we can give Steve control of the farm, the land, through the LLC, but his siblings can also get shares of that. So if Steve sells the farm, he has to divide it equally among all the shareholders, or they're called members, but so that you can run the farm to your delight. But if you sell it, your siblings would share in the profit of the sale of the land.
When you started speaking about the farm situation and you said you've been working on this case for, I think it was 3, 4 years. I was
Yeah,
like, what is going on there? But then as you went into more detail about the family dynamics of said farm, now I get it.
exactly.
Mm,
It's
wow.
it's and sometimes I'm looking at this, I'm going, well, I think this should settle. We can move these pieces around and it can work, and but people aren't interested in what I have to think about selling something. So
What if it was and I'm gonna say this is probably pretty common, but let's say somebody had a boat, really nice boat, and
mhm.
yeah, let's say three children, and one of them like, well, I keep that boat around, and the other's like, well, we don't know how to boat. We don't want to do that.
Right.
What would happen? And it was left. Dad passed away, and it was they find out. Oh, well, he left us the boat, but one wants it, two don't, or one wants it, one doesn't. What do you do?
Well, you can, I mean, what you can do there is you can kind of like, well, I guess you sort of follow the maximum of what's your happiest day, the day you buy your boat. What's the second happiest day in your life, the day you sell your boat. Um,
Yeah.
but I would say you could, like in that case, it does sort of, it may beg for negotiation, right? So you can say, okay, Steve wants the boat, Julie doesn't want the boat, boat's worth, 100K or whatever. I'll see if you get the boat. I'll get like 50,000 of extra of mom. You get the boat, I get 50,000 more in cash or whatever. So you can do some swaps, which help. It's
Mm,
where you're talking about where the swaps, it's harder for the swaps is when you're talking about like, and I don't own a boat. So, and I know boats can be very pricey,
sure.
but we're talking about, you know, the higher end assets.
Well, what if one party, let's say it's two people, one, and they just found out they were left the boat. One
Mhm.
wants it, the other does not. The other, who does not, doesn't have the assets to buy the other person out. Now what?
Well, then, because everybody's got to get it equally, the boat's probably going to end up being sold.
I had a feeling that was coming. Yeah.
Yeah,
What's it? There's no other solution if the other person can't afford to buy the other one out. What are you going to do?
exactly. And yeah, I mean, that's generally what's going to happen. I mean, the same thing could be true of, a vacation home, anything. It just sort of, and with the thing with like a vacation home, with the land, the farmland, the business, all of this can be, forced to be sold. The
Hmm.
issue is, if you've worked so hard for the business or the land or the vacation home has memories, it's worth planning to see if you can create that, you know, hope that it's the next legacy. You don't want, the kids to kill the golden goose kind of thing.
Any other unique assets that we can look at?
Well, so I think that the other one is that sort of touched a little bit more on the business, and the business can have stress not only from the family, but the idea of like again, it kind of goes back to your vacation home with your friend, right? This time there's instead of three people owning the vacation home, three people are in business together. They're making the widgets or whatever, and then and they're not related possibly, and so they all have wives, they have children, grandchildren, whatever, but yet the three of them know exactly how to run that business. They know how to manage the employees, they know the skills, whatever that looks like. And nobody else may be involved in the business, right? The spouses aren't, they're doing whatever they're doing, and one of them dies. And his or her will may say, I leave everything to my husband or wife.
Hmm.
Now that includes the stock. So now you have, or the business interest. So now you have the business being owned by two of the founders and the founder's beneficiary. And, this person is, I'm not going to paint them as evil, but they're just not, they don't know how to run the business. It's not been what they've been doing. And, but they want money out of it. So they can create stress on many levels, to agitate, say, why aren't we doing this, whatever it looks like. So, um, and one of the things to think about with like business and wealth transfer that way is in a business you can create what's called a buy sell, and the idea with that is that it's a contract and you set a price. So Steve dies, you sign the contract, and it says that his shares will be sold, or in business interests will be sold back to Julie and Sam for a predetermined price. We'll pay him out, and we're happy as the remaining business owners because now we own 100% of the business, and Steve's wife or spouse or kids are generally happy because what did they get out of it? They got cash.
Hmm.
And so they're made whole. They can walk away with something that they're likely more happy, and the business is likely more happy too because they can continue to run this business without interference from people they never were imagine they'd be in business with.
So we have an email. Can we go to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Instant feedback, Steve at gmail.com, where Linda from Hollywood, Florida checks in. She says, my mother added my brother to her bank account before she died. Does that override what her will says?
I'm going to say yes, because what she did is I'm going to say what she created was a joint bank account between brother and mom. And so when you have a joint asset, whether it's a bank account or a stock account or a piece of real estate, it goes what we call operation of law by the contract to that survivor. So mom set that up and it went directly to brother and not under the will.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah,
that action after the will was done supersedes what's in the will?
exactly. So basically, depending on the size of that account, mom overrode or overwrote that part of her will. The other thing mom did with that is more dangerous for mom is that when you add somebody to an account like that and you make them a joint owner, her brother could have taken money out while mom was alive and mom had to spend to go to Tahiti. Mom had no legal recourse over that to stop him. The other part you have is that let's say he's a decent guy, he wouldn't take the money from mom. But we all have potential for creditors, whether it is overspending on our credit cards, gambling,
Mm.
or a car accident, which no matter how you know uh, responsible we are as humans, we can't write that out of our potential problems, right? He owns it, and his creditors could look around and go, "Oh, look, he owns half of an account in Hollywood, Florida, wherever it is. We're going to use that to satisfy his debt."
Mm.
So mom put her assets at risk in addition to kind of maybe blowing up part of her estate plan.
Wow. That's Julie, that's an eye opener. I would have never guessed that this action supersedes what's in the will. It's kind of
Yeah.
scary, especially if, I look at different scenarios, especially if mom was in a right mind when she made the
Yeah.
will 10 years ago, 20 years
Yep.
ago. And let's say, I'm just saying here, let's say that she had a stroke or her health was declining, maybe a little bit of dementia, something going on there. And let's say the son convinced her to put his name on the bank account. Easy enough to do. Just sign something.
Absolutely.
And then he knows he's armed with this information that this would supersede what's in the will. So he's got whatever's coming to him in the will, and he's got that bank account too.
Exactly. And depending on the size of the bank account, he could have a tremendous double dip. I mean, sometimes parents do it because one reason parents do it, they think, well, I'm worried if I get sick or whatever, I want somebody to be able to pay my bills.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and in that case, maybe they're putting Steve's name or Julie's name on their checking account, and maybe they're carrying like 5, 10,000 a month in there. That's all they have. But sometimes it's on all of the assets, or a large percentage. So it's the windfall of not 5 or 10,000. It's 500,000 or a million or
Yeah,
whatever that number is.
yeah. And it was done out of convenience in case something were to
Right.
happen so that you have control of this account. Very, very, just normal situation, but
Yeah.
oof. Out of time, final question.
Perfect.
In that
Sure.
scenario, even if mom had an irrevocable trust, same deal, doesn't matter. Its son's name is on the
Well, if
bank
the
account.
assets, yeah, if the assets were in the trust, he couldn't do that. But if her name, it was a bank account not in the trust, absolutely same solution or answer.
What an education. this is this is why we need to consult with experts on this stuff, because I never saw that one coming. I really didn't. I would think,
Yeah.
yeah, whoa. You practice in Maryland. I know you've said before.
Yes.
Thankfully, if somebody has a question outside of the state, that you could answer it. If they need some help. How do they find you?
Sure. They can reach me you can reach me through my website, which is www.jasestate, it's ESTATE law.com, or they can call the office at 410-286-8100.
Thank you for the deep insight today. Very interesting. How this, and I'm going to say it again. When you said, "Yeah, I'm working on this one for 3 or 4 years," I really didn't see why until you went into the depth of I mean, true depth of these situations. It's like going to the bottom of the ocean, 5 miles down. There's a lot going on.
Exactly. But to be honest, Steve, when I look at the case, I'm like, I don't see why it's still going on this long. And I'm dealing with it.
I'll bet you. I'll bet you there's some emotions connected to that with the people that you're working with. And when that
100%.
gets involved, it takes longer. Thank you so much for today. We'll talk soon, okay?
You're welcome. Have a great afternoon.
You too.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.